So, a new season's upon us, and because of the joys of a certain worldwide contagion, I've spent most of the year sat in bed either working my way through the old endless pit that is the to watch pile, or working on this show. It's been quite liberating in a sense, really. I'm a bit of an introvert in real life and constantly getting dragged out of the house against my will, so telling me that it's literally a matter of life or death to sit at home, eat Doritos, drink a fine array of spirits and do nothing but brush up on film history is a bit like telling me to go on a paid vacation. So far I've watched almost every Universal monster movie ever made, I've brushed up on the works of Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan, William Castle has left a serious impression on me, and I've mopped up a few holes in my film knowledge of 50s B-movie creature features. But in amongst the mass binging of titles I've worked through over the last few months, only one film has stood out amongst the tide as a true and solid representation of the genre it belongs to. And that movie is 1974's Truck Turner. It's a blaxploitation action movie that comes from the same mould as films like Shaft, Coffee and Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. But what stood out particularly for me with this movie is that rather than spend the majority of the film's runtime trying to make Truck out to be the coolest, most badass character in the known universe, this film actually goes out of its way to make him come across as a little bit schlubby. Not massively so, but just enough that it really adds a bit of extra depth to the character and puts a really nice low level of comedy in there that turns what could have been a generic cooler-than-thou blaxploitation flick into something infinitely more entertaining and enjoyable. Truck's still a badass, he can still pull in the ladies, and he's still an unstoppable hurricane of a bounty hunter. But it's the little things that really warmed me to this film, like the fact that he lives in a run-down, shabby apartment building with his cat, he has garbage piled up everywhere, he predominantly eats fast food and spends his downtime drinking with his friend and co-bounty hunter. He's not massively young, the film plays more on the angle that he's actually just a little bit too old to be dealing with this shit. He has a partner who he clearly cares about, but he's happy to sell her down the river as she's a known thief. He's semi-prone to grifting in order to get what he wants, and he's always looking for the quickest way to make money on the lowest amount of effort. It would have been easy to just make him, well, a knockoff version of Shaft, but I think Truck's so much cooler for not being an unstoppable Mr. Cool type. I find that the flaws actually make him a much more interesting and complex character. The film opens almost perfectly in setting the scene and tone for the world we're getting into, as we see a great sequence of shots of partially constructed high-rises contrasting with garbage-strewn streets and multiple shots of homeless alcoholics and drug addicts fighting alongside signs for bail bonds and food handouts. These are mean streets, and only Truck and his friend Jerry can clean them up. The pair work as bounty hunters, living from paycheck to make ends meet and doing what needs to be done to pay the bills. The film picks up with Truck and Jerry as they're on the way to a military base to bring in a known child molester. And after guilting the major on the army base into releasing the prisoner, the pair get their man, and while returning him to jail, Truck drops in on his partner who's doing time for shoplifting. She's not happy that Truck hasn't visited her a lot during this time, and he promises he will try to visit her more often. But realistically, he won't. Anyway, after the visit they head across the street to their go-to bail bond provider, who's happy with their day's work and tells them that a contact called Fogarty has been in touch with a big paying job. Truck and Jerry make it clear that Fogarty means trouble, and initially they're absolutely against the idea. But eventually they go and see him and he lays his cards on the table. He wants them to bring in a pimp on the run known as Gator. The issue? He has a prior, assault with intent. And that spells massive trouble. That and Fogarty's underpaying on the job too. So at first they point blank refuse, but eventually they manage to twist Fogarty's arm to the point that the pay becomes just too good to turn down. So using their contacts, they're able to track down Gator's main squeeze, a woman known as Dorinda, and through Dorinda they're able to track Gator. But the plan doesn't quite pull off the way they'd hoped. Gator ends up dead. Truck and Jerry aren't massively happy about that, but dead or alive, Gator is sorted and at least they get paid. So they continue as if it's business as usual. However, when Dorinda finds out that Gator was killed by truck, she loses her goddamn mind and calls a meeting of all the pimps and pushers in the district, offering a massive cut of what was Gator's but is now her pimping business in exchange for Truck and Jerry's heads. Some accept, some call her crazy and leave, but from here on in, Truck and Jerry are now on the city's most wanted list. And what follows is an action-packed extravaganza of car chases, shootouts and near misses that not only risk the lives of Truck and Jerry, but of Truck's partner and the wider population too. With time running out and the net closing in on our protagonists, things become a matter of life and death, and the question quickly becomes, will Truck survive long enough to set things straight and shut down the pimps, or will he end up just another line in the obituaries column? As I mentioned at the top of this review, I really think this is a fun little movie, and the main reason for that is that the script really doesn't take itself seriously. Again, that's not to say that this is a comedy, but it's totally relaxed in what it wants to achieve, and the pacing is about as perfect as it can be. If I was being a little bit nitpicky, I'd maybe argue that the third act begins to wobble just a tiny bit on the pacing front, but it ties things up before it becomes majorly noticeable. Honestly, this is about as good as it gets in terms of structuring. There are quite a few instances of padding throughout, and whereas normally that would be a big problem for me, here it feels totally right, as they usually manage to make the padding part of the character building. There's never a totally pointless padded scene. Each one usually gives you a better understanding of at least one of the characters, or gives you just a little bit more information in terms of helping you craft the story better. Yes, they're not essential, but at least they don't feel completely pointless. The characters are all pretty much larger than life, and the pimps in particular look like they could have doubled for gang leaders in The Warriors, they're that flamboyant. The bombastic dialogue coupled with over-the-top performances really helps create a very powerful piece of writing. This is arguably one of the better scripts I've sat through in a very long time. Making this script all the more surprising quality-wise is the fact it actually comes from a collaborative effort of 4 different writers: Oscar Williams, Michael Allen, Jerry Wilkes, and an uncredited set of contributions from Lee Chapman. This is Jerry's only film credit. He did nothing else in the film industry, as far as I'm aware, before or after this. Oscar has 5 writing credits, which are all mainly for blaxploitation flicks such as Black Belt Jones and Hot Potato. Again though, he didn't really do all that much beyond those 5 writing credits. Michael's background is fantastic, with some really top-notch credits including Enter the Dragon and Flash Gordon, though again he only has 7 of them. And Lee, despite being uncredited, arguably has the most experience in the field, with 19 writing credits, predominantly for TV, including the likes of Walker Texas Ranger, the original run of Mission Impossible, and My Favourite Martian. I can't say for sure who did what here with this one, but their combined efforts have produced a work that I can say definitely has a high rewatch value. The direction here is loose and a touch on the experimental side of things. The scenes are well shot and well structured in terms of helping to craft a narrative, but there's also a few moments that do go a little off the beaten path for this genre's filmmaking. The one that sticks in my mind is the shot of Truck and Jerry driving to the army base, where the camera is positioned from the back seat as if we're passengers listening in on their conversation. It's a nice way to treat what otherwise might have been a fairly by-the-numbers exposition piece. There also appear to have been many moments in this film where I found myself thinking, oh, Quentin Tarantino nicked that. There are moments here that are just so blatant like that. In many ways, it's kinda neat seeing where respected directors of today found their source material. They half-inched it from the drive-in. Overall, this is a nice, fluidly directed feature. The cast are all, for the most part, handled with care as they work with their sets and locations, though admittedly some do work better than others. The location work in particular I found was quite high energy, and they've really got a knack of seamlessly tying together the location sections and the set sections to create a smooth overall end product. If I had any complaints, there's a scene near the beginning where Truck beats up the child molester in a field. It pretty much comes out of nowhere, and while I don't really have an issue with it from a script perspective, it's shot a bit differently to the rest of the film. There's a lot of handheld shots with wide-angle lenses, and it's all shot very close. It's one of the only, if not the only, sequence that shoots this way. And given that the rest of the film is predominantly set on grubby streets or luxury penthouses, the green and open field land is just totally out of place when put into context of the rest of the film's visual style. It's just odd it being there, and in fairness it could have been trimmed out and it wouldn't have been detrimental to the film's plot. I mean, I know why it's there, it's because the diddler got caught too easily, and without it makes it look like he wasn't punished enough. Plus, Truck beating up a diddler establishes him as a big tough hero guy of the picture, despite his flaws. Working effortlessly with the direction, the Cine 2 is good and solid. While I can't say it's 100% perfect, as there are one or two wobbly shots or sequences where I would have personally approached them slightly differently, unless you're a picky, border snobbish filmy like myself, you won't really notice they're there. Within the context of both cinema at the time and bearing in mind this film's place within the exploitation genre, the Cine's good. I had almost no qualms with it. They pretty much do everything by the book and more often than not use the perfect shot types to marry up with exactly what's happening on screen in order to really emphasise the character's emotions or delivery. While it's not quite as polished as something like Foxy Brown or Coffee, it's streets ahead of movies like Dolomite and galaxies away from Death Force in terms of production quality. And it's a delight to tune out and get engrossed into. Heading up the direction of this feature we have Jonathan Kaplan, and much like the writers, his filmography, especially for the time, is crazy for how good this movie has turned out. He has 38 directing credits and Truck Turner was his 4th feature directing credit, and 2 of the 3 before this were softcore porn thrillery type pictures. Had you told me that he was capable of making something like this movie based purely on what he'd worked on up to this point, I'd have hard passed on watching this before you'd even got to pitch the picture, let alone hearing the script. But this was really genuinely fantastic to sit and watch here. Unfortunately, after this production he didn't really work in the genre again, and he only really made a handful more movies before he went into full-time television. His biggest credit there was probably his work for the US medical drama series ER, where he directed almost 110 episodes. While his last credit was in 2014 as a producer, it's good to see he's been able to maintain work in the industry, and if he ever decides to dust off his feature directing cap again, I'll be sure to try my best to check it out. Performance-wise, the only truly awful performance in this movie is Charles Cypher as the drunk guy who hangs around the bail bonds building trying to score some free booze. I think it's more of a case of miscasting rather than him being a bad actor, because he did go on to play many decent roles, including Brackett in Halloween. But here, he really doesn't work. Luckily though, he's only in one scene, so it's not like we're stuck with him for the entire movie. But yeah, he's the only one who truly stands out as an iffy or not quite right performance. Everyone else? Well, they all range from good to incredible. Isaac Hayes is fantastic here as Truck, with a strong and masculine presence that gives way to small underpinned comedic moments here and there. He plays the part with such a nice blend and range of emotions and personality that he absolutely won me over within the first 15 minutes of this film, and is arguably one of the best things about it. I don't think this picture would be half as good without him, he's that good. Credit also has to be given to Nichelle Nichols as Dorinda. As I'm not too familiar with Nichols' work outside of the original run of Star Trek, to see her evolve from a bitchy and slightly aggressive partner of a pimp to a full-blown psychopathic, evil, calculating, ruthless and vicious leader, well, it kinda took me by surprise. I really wasn't expecting her to be capable of such a performance, but not only did she totally surpass my expectations, she soared past them. Simply put, she's incredible in this movie. She fully embodies the character, and her unhinged handling and taking down of Truck constantly feels like it's going to spill out of the screen at any moment. Whenever she's on screen, she's totally and utterly watchable and completely mesmerising. She has easily some of the best lines and deliveries in this film, and the strength with which she plays the character is seriously some next level stuff. She's amazing, simply put, and worth the price of admission alone. All of the supporting cast are pretty good and solid. No one is massively standout, but no one's massively awful either. They pretty much get through the scenes as best they can with as few screw-ups as possible. Alan Week's Jerry is a good foil to Truck and has some fun moments to play with, and Truck's partner Annie, played by Annazette Chase, has a feisty quality, which I found quite enjoyable too. Sam Laws also plays a great role as the boss of the bail bonds company, Nate, who again chews almost every scene he's in. Everyone here plays a pretty good run on this, which is quite unusual for the exploitation genre, but somehow these guys have pulled it off. The ribbon on all of this? The soundtrack, which I'm struggling to decide whether it's stereotypical of the genre or defining of it. It's a full and beautiful set with funk-centric riffs that have a real distinctiveness which sounds very similar to Shaft. But then Isaac Hayes sang and performed for the Shaft soundtrack, and he sings and performs for this one too. So the similarities are a bit more understandable. While this wasn't the originator of marrying up that distinct funk tone to blaxploitation films in general, I do believe that this film definitely helped cement its usage within the genre. Simply put, it's a fantastic OST and one I'd love to get my hands on a vinyl copy of at some point. It's just so impressive. Truck Turner was released on VHS in the UK in 1986 by Stable Cane Video. It was a post-cert X-rental release, no pre-cert releases for us unfortunately. It was then re-released for home markets in 1998 before getting a bare-bones DVD release by MGM in 2003, and then finally in 2017 the film arrived on Blu-ray courtesy of 101 Films. And my god, they've done a great job of cleaning this thing up, it looks beautiful. The extras are a little thin on the ground, there's basically a commentary and that's about it, but it's probably the most comprehensive release that we've had to date, so that's something. It's extremely cheap at the time of writing, holding steady at around about £6, and I highly recommend if you can grab a copy that you do so. It's great fun and a brilliant way to kick off any movie night in style. I'm surprised at how little recognition this film gets really. Even on IMDb, the film only just has over 2,000 ratings and it sits on about a 7 out of 10, which this film most definitely is not. With a killer story, wonderfully eccentric and over-the-top characters, some great action scenes, solid Cinean direction and a score that could melt butter. If you aren't watching Truck Turner this weekend, what are you doing with your life?